Hola a todos, soy Pamela de Asian Boss. ¿Te imaginas tener que escapar de tu país debido a la constante violencia, bombardeos y el colapso de edificaciones? Esta es la realidad de 6,6 millones de sirios que debieron huir de su país debido a la guerra civil siria, la cual comenzó en 2011 y la que provocó la mayor crisis de refugiados en el mundo. Uno de los refugiados es Anas, que huyó a Japón con el fin de tener una nueva y mejor vida. Y el día de hoy tuvimos la oportunidad de conversar con él en Tokio para conocer un poco más sobre su experiencia. Veamos lo que tiene para contarnos.
You're originally from Syria and now living in Japan.
Yeah.
And when we first heard about your story, it was just an incredible one. So thank you very much for giving us the opportunity today.
It's definitely my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background? Where are you from?
I'm from a city called Homs in Syria. It's not a very big city and nothing much happens there most of the time. I would say that I lived in a rather poor neighborhood, maybe not the poorest, but it was definitely not a rich neighborhood. And I had two loving parents, and they worked so hard to give us the best life they could afford. My dad is an agricultural engineer and a teacher, and he is also a business owner, and my mom is a pharmacist.
Did you think that you were going to come to Japan when you were, a student or, during your childhood in Syria?
I thought maybe about visiting Japan once, but I didn't think I would be living here.
But you knew about the country.
I definitely knew a lot about not a lot, but I had some big image about the country that I developed maybe from my father. My father always used to tell me that, well, if you want a durable product, if you want a product that is cheap and durable, please take the Japanese one.
Okay, so made in Japan.
Made in Japan is like the brand of the good things. A funny thing, actually, when I was young, we had a lot of anime on TV. Everybody used to love Pokemon, but people started saying that Pokemon is made from an enemy country.
Why?
Such as the US or Israel. So people started saying like, what Pikachu like means death to Arabs, for instance, or like the names of the Pokemon. People were saying like the name of the Pokemon, they stand for insults for our community, like for the Arabs or for the Muslims, and everybody started demanding boycotts for Pokemon, and like we want justice, we want explanation. But of course, like the studio had to do something about it. And they released a statement that was in every advertisement that this anime is from Japan. And Pikachu means this, and Pokemon means pocket monster. And like they made this kind of ad every single day, like between every show, especially for children, to teach them that this is not something that targets you. So this was the first time that I discovered that anime is made in Japan. It's not made in USA or made in Syria.
What is your legal status here in Japan? Are you considered as like the refugee in Japan?
Actually, I'm considered as a student. It's a little bit complicated because I was a refugee in Lebanon, but when I came here to Japan, I was recognized only as a student. As a start, a student status would definitely be great, because it definitely gave me a chance to escape the situation that I was in. But on the other hand, like if I finish my studies and unfortunately I cannot find a job, and then for some circumstances my visa has expired, then I might be deported back to Syria, where I might face at the minimum jail and at the maximum death penalty.
So for those who are not familiar with what's going on or what happened in Syria, can you briefly help us understand what is the Syrian Revolution about?
So Syria got independence from France in the late 40s, 1940s, and we had a kind of a shape of democracy that was still an early democracy that was not very stable, until the father of the current president had a coup in the country and seized power by the force of the army, and of course many supporters. This was the year 1970. And in 1970, people had no chance to express anything. All political life died out, and democracy ceased to stop immediately. In 1980, people started to make some demands or revolutions and just say that we need more space, we need more freedom. It was all completely destroyed by force. So people in the 1980s learned that there is no way that they can stand up to this brutal regime. In the year 2000, the first president died out of old age. And we thought that finally we can get a chance to maybe experience some better, maybe not democracy, but like a change, definitely. But surprisingly, it didn't happen. The presidency was inherited to the son, which is the first inherited presidency in the whole world. In Syria, maybe we have circles of privilege, I would say. The first circle is the presidential family, which is definitely the innermost circle. After that, you would see the commerce support loyalists. And these commerce support loyalists are the people who give money to the regime. And of course, they receive all the laws and the subsidiaries from the regime. So they kind of feed each other in a symbiotic relationship. And the third circle, which is unfortunately, this group is a group that was created by the regime. They are a group that belong to a certain religion that is called Alawites. And these Alawites, they support the regime out of fear, because the regime convinced them that if the president goes away, then they will be obliterated. So they fear so much that the regime will change. So they support him to the extent, to the maximum. They would do anything. They would kill people for this regime. And of course, these people are the ones who were more and more enforced in the army. So the army slowly but surely became predominantly Alawites, especially the top leaders. And the fourth circle is the other minorities that are not Muslims. For instance, Christianity or Druze or any other minorities. And then after that, you see the circle of the Muslim Arabs, which is the circle before the last. These people like maybe include maybe around 50% of people in Syria. They have little to no privilege. They cannot find a job. They struggle a lot. They cannot say anything. Freedom of speech is basically non-existent. And of course, unfortunately, there is the last circle, which is the non-Arab Muslims, which also constitute maybe around 20% of the Syrians. In their areas, there's no electricity most of the times, and water is very scarce, and development is close to zero.
Wow.
Yeah, and this is only like one level of systematic oppression and systematic installation of fear. So the people in Daraa are the first people who started the demonstrations, and they said, this is enough, and we will not have it like this. And they started the revolution.
That's 2011.
2011, the 15th of March.
But that just started as a small protest, right?
Exactly.
So, people didn't like how the government was taking away everything from them, and then it just became...
It became like a roller coaster, taking everything. Because I remember from the first day when I heard this news, of course the local news, they didn't show anything. The local news, until today, 10 years later, they say that there is nothing in Syria and it's a peaceful space. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And they accuse all of the people who went to the revolution as being terrorists. And Islamic left, extreme most right Islamist groups, which is definitely not the case. Of course, maybe some Islamic groups arose many, many years later, but they are not the soul of the revolution.
After the revolution started, from your experience, how brutal did the government get?
From in day one, the army came and went into the mosque, the Omari mosque, from the first day. Like, using this brutal force is not even like for other countries in the West, for instance. If there's a riot, they would get riot control units, or maybe they will get the police. But in Syria, from day one, they brought the army that is supposed to be the protector of the people.
And then they attacked the people.
And they attacked the people. They insulted the most sacred place for these people, which was something that Syrians could not accept. So many cities started to rally. I went into marching with everybody, and I was around at the beginning of the march, like not towards the end. And there were like some kind of what they call themselves as courageous people They were like running and checking the corners if there's anybody to make sure that everybody who's walking is like safe. Oh, you can go this street, you can go this street. And I remember at the very corner, one guy was saying, yeah, it's fine here. You can come pass. You can come pass. And a bullet went into his head in front of me. And it was the first time that I've seen a dead body or a person die in front of me. I was so shocked. I froze immediately for I don't know how much. Like some people had to drag me. And I saw him falling on the ground. And of course, everybody started running. And this was only the first week. And we were just saying, we want freedom, we want equality, we want jobs, we want to live. So far, the revolution has lost around 1 million people. 1 million people have died in that Syrian war.
You also lost people who were close to you?
Actually, I lost 2 uncles and 3 cousins. Not mentioning the people who were detained and tortured and were scarred for life. And these are only, I'm talking about immediate family. I'm not talking about friends or like a cousin of my cousin or my dad's cousin. I'm talking about very immediate family. I lost so many. Even my brother was detained for 1 full year. And he saw torture that I'm sure none of your viewers would like to hear about. It's horrible. He went out and until today, he's still struggling mentally to deal with it after going out. And it cost our family all of our sanity until he got out. And we still believe that we are one of the luckiest people in Syria that he got out alive. Most people that I know, their son or daughter or father or mother or child can go into the torture chambers and they will die. But what's even worse than dying is when you do not know anything about what happens to them.
Yeah.
Now, according to UN, there's around 200,000 Syrian people with unknown location. They were taken by the regime, but nobody knows where they are. Nobody knows if they're alive or dead. Nobody ever heard about them ever since.
Right. So just when you think about what happened that you saw, basically it was a lot of bombing, a lot of guns and all that.
Every neighborhood, there was a checkpoint. Every neighborhood.
What did they check?
They will restrict your mobility. You cannot go.
Oh, you cannot even pass.
You cannot pass. If you pass, you need to have a reason. Like if you're a student, you would need to show that you have an ID, you have classes today, they need to go to the university.
Phone as well if you
they definitely check your phone. This is the first thing they check. And most of the times they check your phone, and if you have Facebook, even if you have nothing on Facebook, you will be jailed just because you have installed Facebook. Because there's a chance that you might do something.
To talk about your
country. Because everybody who, most people who shared their story, they shared them on Facebook. So the government was very aware that this Facebook, we need to stop something called Facebook. But a lot of times they would take you without any reason, just to instill fear, just to make sure that they are in power and you are not allowed to say anything. And they thought this method would work, but it didn't work. It made people even more angry and even more resentful that we will not be silenced, not at all, at any cost, because already many people lost their family, many people lost their homes. In Homs City, as I was saying to you, the whole city was blockaded. Nobody was allowed to go in or go out. But before the blockade, severe shelling lasting for many days straight. They would fire thousands of shelling, like random shelling on anybody that is existing in this land. Not even like they have an intel on somebody, they shell them. No, they shell everything.
So
I remember
the whole city was gone?
The whole city was gone. The whole old city. It was completely destroyed. Now you can see on YouTube, actually, there are many videos that show you some drone going there.
There's nothing.
There is nothing. It's just rubbles everywhere. So a few days before that, they were starting shelling. And I remember my two brothers and my big sister, they had already moved to another house that is considered relatively safe. And I stayed with my dad in the house because we were like, it will stop shelling in a few days and maybe it will be better. Because sometimes it will shell, like they start shelling for 1, 2, 3 days and maybe they will stop. And maybe we'll say, oh, it's over. And then we can continue living our normal life. But this time it bombed so hard that the next building, the building facing us, completely collapsed. And I remember the next day, my dad was like, it looks sunny today and the weather is good. Maybe they're not gonna start shelling today. So he was going into the balcony and I told him, Dad, don't go out in the balcony. I rushed and I just pulled him back by force, and immediately a shell came into the balcony and destroyed 4 balconies under each other. Like the whole balconies, they were completely destroyed. And at that day, my dad was like, we have to run immediately. So I grabbed only one bag, like my backpack, that had only my laptop, and I ran away. We ran away to another house in Homs City, only for 1 day. The next day, we immediately fled to Damascus. And this was my first migration, running away to Damascus, the capital. And until that day, I have never seen our house again, since that day.
Can you tell us a little bit about the day that you actually left the country?
Actually, this was definitely the worst emotional day I have ever had.
When was that?
It was the 13th of February 2013. The main reason I stayed actually in Syria is because I wanted to graduate. I knew that if I escaped Syria without a degree, then I will be useless.
Right.
And I will just be living on
The streets.
the streets and petty from anybody. And when I graduated, I knew that I have to leave Syria because of the military conscription, the compulsive military conscription. In Syria, they will take you and drag you from your house to make you serve the military. It's not an option. On the morning of the 13th of February, I remember my dad waking me up, like he was shaking me, like wake up quickly. And I woke up like so afraid. I thought there's shelling, because this is what's usually happened. Like if they wake you so quickly, it means there's shelling or you have to evacuate or something happened. And I was like, what, Dad? He was like, get ready, go down, go to the first floor. I was like, do I wear clothes? He was like, yeah, wear clothes, any clothes, just wear anything and get down. And I wore something like anything and I get down. And there was a car, a taxi car. And he was like, get in. And the car was full. Like there were 3 people in the back and 2 people in the front. I was like, where do I get in? And he opened the front seat and he made me sit next to the person in the front seat and closed the door. And then he opened the back seat, the bunker of the car, and he put one of the bags that he randomly selected. And he put it and he closed. And he said, see you. And the car went.
You didn't know who was in the car. You didn't know.
I knew the driver. He was a friend of my dad.
Okay.
And I knew that he's going to Lebanon. But I didn't, there was no explanation of what is going on. For 4 hours, I was on the way to Lebanon. 4 hours of complete crying. I was crying for 4 hours non-stop. Everybody in the car was trying to soothe me down. But for me, I felt like I felt like being completely separated from my country. I felt like I was literally forcibly removed. And later I knew that my dad did this because he knew that the lists of people who are not allowed to exit the country, they are issued 1 month in advance. So it's not the 15th of March, it's actually the 15th of February. So
if he didn't make you move that day, you'll be at the army.
Yeah, I would be either at the army, but most probably I would be dead. Because at the army, if I go to join the army, they will force me to kill my brothers and sisters. But I refuse to do that. And if I refuse to do that, they will kill me immediately because they consider me a traitor. I didn't even say goodbye to my mom or to my brothers who were all asleep. I didn't even get a chance to hug my dad, who also took me to the car. He just closed the door and he didn't even wave. The car just walked. I felt so brokenhearted at so many levels. it was excruciatingly painful. I don't think I have seen similar pain.
What happens if you go back to Syria?
If I go back to Syria, I wouldn't go any far. At the border unit, at the border control police, they will immediately check my name that I am listed for the military, and they will immediately take me to jail before the military because I am late for joining the military. I should join voluntarily. But because I didn't join, so they will take me to jail or torture before they take me to the military. So there was not even a close chance of me doing that.
So after that, did your brothers come to join you, or?
My middle brother, he graduated. However, he was riding the bus to Damascus to have the clarification of documents because you can only do it in Damascus. And the next day, he already booked a taxi to come to Lebanon to me. But on that bus, the bus entered the area of the extreme loyalists in my city in Homs. And the officer came to the bus and he said, "You come down." And he was taken for torture rooms for 1 full year. So at that time, all hope for him died. All hope. And we didn't hear from him actually only after 6 months of him going there. And after my dad paid tons of money that was all borrowed money that he didn't even have. Because
how much did he pay? Do you even know?
I think as an estimate, he paid a total of around $80,000 to get him out.
Wow.
So this gives you an image of how the government just wants to suck the blood out of the people. And sometimes they do, not only, they would do abductions and they would call for ransom. Because what really matters is the money.
So how did you feel when you heard the news that your brother was detained?
I would say there's a part of me that died that day that I still cannot get back. Because everybody who goes to these concentration camps, they never go out alive. And very rarely, when they go out alive, they don't live a normal life.
You're already somewhat...
They're scarred forever. Forever. And because we didn't hear about my brother for 6 months, to be honest, we all thought he was dead. My brother actually is much more skinnier than me. He's very tiny. And many times you would see like very big guys like going into these torture rooms, and they will die within 1 or 2 months. They wouldn't last. So I thought my brother would not last even a single slap on the face. I was talking with my dad sometime and he told me, "You know, Anas, I wish that your brother is dead so that he doesn't have to suffer." And imagining your brother or your son or your sister or your daughter or your mom or your grandma to live with that is beyond imagination. So luckily, he was able to go out and he came to Lebanon. He stayed with me for 1 month before he was able to join with my brother in Turkey, my other brother.
So both of them are in...
They stayed for a while in Turkey, but working there was very difficult for them. So they had to go actually to Germany.
So what happened after you got to Lebanon? Did you just, find a job?
At that time, I remember I escaped with $200 in my pocket. Originally, my dad called a cousin of his who is Lebanese and entrusted him with me. He was like, actually, I know a company owner, and if you're interested, I'm not sure he will give you any job or any opportunity, but you might as well just try and go see him. I can just introduce you. And I sat with the company owner and he started asking me a few questions. I was like, well, then you start tomorrow.
So you got a job as
an environmental engineer.
Okay, and that's what you majored in.
Which is what I studied in, yeah.
Wow, and then you worked there for how many years?
I worked there for 7 years, almost 7 years.
Okay.
Quite a long time.
Why did you decide to make a change from there?
First of all, Lebanon is as unstable as Syria. And finding a development chance in Lebanon was very difficult, which is where I started thinking about going abroad. I immediately thought about Japan, but I didn't pursue Japan as a first option. The main reason is because my brothers are in Germany. And I felt immediately closer to Germany, like I want to see them and I don't know when I will see them. So at the beginning I tried Germany, but it was very difficult to get any kind of visa or scholarship there. And to be honest, I tried over 20 countries. I always had Japan in my mind, and actually I had a teacher who taught me Japanese back in Syria, taught me a little bit of Japanese. And he contacted me and told me, like, why don't you come to Japan? So I decided to apply for the scholarship. It's actually a special program. It's it's by the Japanese government, but only for Syrian refugees residing in Lebanon and Jordan.
Wow, then you know everybody applies, but you know you got into the program. So how did you feel when you got?
I was like, this is not reality. This is definitely like a dream. I was like, it's impossible that this is actually happening. They sent us an email actually with a letter of acceptance.
Yeah.
I was like, I saw them. I was like, am I mistaken? Am I mistaken? Let's check again. Let's check again. Yeah. I was like, is this like provisional acceptance or is this actual acceptance? It was definitely acceptance. I was at work. I remember I was at work. It was around noontime. And I was like, I will quit my job right now.
And you got the flight ticket and then you flew over to Japan for the first time.
For the first time.
And that was 2 years ago?
It was almost 2 years ago. When I was in the plane, I was like, freedom. Like the feeling of freedom is beyond imaginable. Because Lebanon indeed is a nice country, but the racism there is from another level. The racism, I wouldn't say of the people. The people are generally very, very nice. But the government racism, the institutional racism was so bad, so bad. For instance, I worked as an environmental engineer. And later in my job, I was a manager. But on my visa, because of the laws of the Lebanese government, a Syrian cannot work as an engineer. So on my visa, I'm working as a garbage collector.
What?
Yeah. All Syrians, even if you are working as, I don't know, consultants for the government, on your visa, you will still be called garbage collector or manual labor. Even your friends can come and tell you these kind of things. At least you're a refugee that is not sitting in a tent. And this kind of things, like they think that it's okay to say this, but the person who is sitting in a tent, they don't have a better option. If they had a better option, they would do it. Right. So this kind of behavior, when I was riding the plane to Japan, I was like, no more, you know, like I will not accept anybody telling me this ever again. So when I came here, I swear I almost kissed the land that was here. I was like,
Japanese land.
This is a chance to live. Like for the first time, I felt like I'm an equal human being. Like it sounds so strange maybe for other people, but for me, it was definitely something so exhilarating to feel that I'm finally human, I'm treated the same. If we compare Japan to the West countries, Japan is, first of all, much safer, and second of all, there is almost no racism.
Okay.
You don't go in the street and somebody will call you any name. They will not come to you and tell you, oh, you're a Syrian, you belong to the tent.
So would you say it exceeded your expectation, or there was something that was actually
in many regards, it exceeded my expectations. In some regards, maybe I had the wrong image. To be honest, like I thought I would have a lot of Japanese friends when I come here, but maybe it's mainly because of the pandemic that I was not able to have that many friends. But I noticed that getting a Japanese friend is not a very easy thing to do.
There's also the language barrier.
The language barrier is definitely.
What would you consider like the biggest cultural shock or cultural difference that you experienced between Syria and Japan?
Like saying hi to people. Like in Syria, it's very common to just hug people. And like even guys, and like for instance in Syria, guys kiss each other.
Oh!
Yeah, on the cheek. It's very like normal. And here I imagine if I ever kiss a guy on the cheek, like I don't imagine, I want to imagine the reaction. Shaking hands is not very common sometimes, just like a nod of the head. So this was a little bit of shock. So this is a simple thing that was different for me. And hugging people, I definitely miss hugging people. We are hugging people.
Have you spoke with your Japanese friends about your story?
Mostly no, because I tell them general information. But the moment that it becomes a little bit maybe political, their English level fails to understand, and my Japanese level fails to convey my message. So we just agree that it's a difficult situation.
I see.
So the language barrier is definitely the main reason behind that.
But do you think people in Japan are aware of what happened in Syria or what's going on in Syria?
I think not. I don't think people are aware, because almost every Japanese person that I've met so far, like, they have only heard about Syria because of the war. But they don't know why there is a war. What is the revolution about? What is the prospect of the people? Like, Japan is so far from this world, as like geographically so far also. But for me, it's a shock that I have to explain sometimes very simple stuff.
Like what?
Like where is Syria? I told them, like, Syria is in Asia. And they were like, ah, in Asia? They asked me, like, do you have a lot of camels? And I'm like, we don't have camels in Syria. Like, we have a desert, small desert, but we don't have a camel. Like, we have few camels, but only for touristic locations. But we don't use camels. So, but I totally understand that. But to be honest, also, most of the Japanese people I met are rather young. Like, they're still in their teens.
Sure.
So they didn't have a lot of chance to go and see the rest of the world. And Syria does not represent itself in media like the Western community does.
What is going on currently in Syria, and what's going on with your family right now then?
My family, actually, unfortunately, my mom passed away. She was diagnosed with cancer. The health system in Syria is collapsing, and all the good doctors escaped the country years ago.
Right.
And most of the hospitals are, of course, public hospitals. So if you go there and you're about to die, there is nothing they can do to you, or they don't even care what to do to you. So I would say, I choose to believe that she died out of negligence, governmental negligence. So my dad and my sister, on the other hand, they're still back in Syria. And their life is very difficult.
So you can send money back home, or?
It's very difficult, but we can.
No, okay.
But it's very, very difficult.
It has to go through some other
it has to do, yeah, you have to give it by hand to certain people, and they have to deliver it, and you have to trust them, and then they have to meet them, and it's a very difficult story, because
You can't directly send to
No,
Syria right now.
no.
Nobody can.
no, nobody can,
Oh, wow.
because of the sanctions.
But would you say the situation, the whole like bombing, or you know, the chaotic situation is
situation
better
is-
compared to?
Actually, in every city it's different. So I will talk about my home city. In my home city, all the bombing and the shooting has ended, because basically there is no resistance anymore. All of the demonstrators have either died, escaped the country, or gave up, or moved elsewhere. So that doesn't mean that the situation in Syria is good, because in my home city, the checkpoints still exist. Taking people from their homes into torture still exists. You don't know when they will come into your house, or they will randomly take you at any checkpoint from your car or your bicycle or just walking and take you away, and you will be disappeared. The regime
As a
definitely
result.
had the upper hand at all times. There were some times maybe where the demonstrations and the resistance had some upper hand, but the regime received endless support from its allies, whether it's Russia or Iran or or Hezbollah from Lebanon. They were able to gain ultimate priority, and the resistance had no option, because the maximum the resistance can do is maybe get some simple handguns.
Right.
But facing a killing machine of planes and bombardment is nobody can ever stop in the face of that.
But your father didn't decide to leave the country.
We always convinced him to leave. However, he feels so much in love with the land. he would rather die on the land than to escape this land.
Wow.
I always tell him, please come, like you're living in misery. Like they have 1 hour of electricity every single day. They have only 1 hour of electricity sometimes. And they struggle to get food. They have a small quota for gas, small quota of water, small quota of bread that they can take per day. And it's so difficult, and you have to stand in queues in very long lines. Sometimes you have to stand in line for 3 days just to get what you want from basic necessities. So every time I insist on him and tell him, my dad, this is not a living. Please come somewhere else. We will support you. He will be like, I will not leave this land.
What is it that he loves about the land so much? Is it then the people? Because it doesn't sound like
It's definitely the
economic
people.
situation.
And it's definitely much more than the people is the cause. He cannot give up this land and give it to the government, because the government has already taken a lot of our land and gave it to its loyalists. They already renamed whole streets. They already looted all of our houses and sold them publicly in the street. What's most important to fight for is your stance for justice, your stance for your position. This is what he utmostly believes in and what most Syrians believe in. But he is too courageous to step down and say, I want to leave. He would rather stay in Syria and live the rest of his life there.
We know that if you go back, you might be jailed or, death penalty. But if it wasn't the case of the military, would you actually want to go back home?
Well, my case is not only for the military. Like, I will be jailed or tortured not only because of the military, but there are 2 other reasons. First reason is because I am active in the revolution. And second reason is most of the time they take random people that are civilians that have done nothing,
That's true.
that it didn't even join in riots, that didn't even say anything. So there is just no chance for me to go there anytime soon when the current regime is still in place, because there is no trust whatsoever if I go there that they will just let me pass. And I will not even get to see my family. So going there is suicide, to be put simply. I will not go there under any circumstances. And even if I had to be deported, I would rather they throw me in the ocean than to go back.
So what are your plans now that you're a student, you're going to graduate? Ideally, what do you want to...
I have 2 options. One option is to pursue my PhD degree, which I'm excited for, but I'm still not 100% sure I will do it, because it will take a lot of psychological pressure on me.
Power, PhD.
Yeah, and if that doesn't work out, or if I opt out not to do that, then I will definitely work on finding a job here. I'm already improving my Japanese. I will be taking actually the Japanese examination, the JLPT, next month. I applied for it already. So, and I'm planning for internships and job interviews. So I'm already getting familiarized with all of the procedure in Japan.
So you kind of want to settle down.
I want to settle down. I want to find a job here. I want to stay here. It's very comfortable for me.
It's fair to say that a lot of the things that you experience, it's just so unimaginable for us. Is there something that you would like to tell our viewers about Syria or about your experiences?
Well, first of all, I would tell the audience that Syria is a very, very lovely place. The people are so nice, and the food is super delicious. Everybody will love the food in Syria. It is so delicious. I miss it so much. Second of all is that Syrians, they just want what the rest of the world wants. We want equality, we want freedom, we want happiness. Syria is the biggest crisis in modern history of refugee crisis. More than half of the country is the refugees all over the world. And I would tell your viewers, maybe most importantly, is to be tolerant to refugees. Like, refugees are very weak, but they're not weak because they chose to be weak. They're weak because their circumstances govern them. So if you ever have a refugee friend, please hold them and hug them and make them feel that it's okay. and support them in whichever way to become better, to become an active person. And whether Syrian, Palestinian, or whatever nationality that you are, you will make a difference in your host community, whether in Japan, Germany, China, wherever you think is possible. It is possible.
Thank you very much for sharing your experience with us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
She said hug, right?
Yeah.